everyone, and welcome students to this last video of the sixth class. In this video, we're going to speak about regulatory issues, how legal matters could affect companies, and in which cases do we have to be especially careful with regulatory issues, because a lot of times those regulatory issues have a very strong impact in strategic management. We are going to speak during this video, for example, about regulated sectors or the lobbying industry within the European Union. We are going to speak about the gig economy. We are going to speak about how are we regulating the gig economy within the European Union, if it is controversial and why it's controversial. And we are going to speak, for example, on companies with special high potential risk. In those cases, the managers of such companies have to be especially careful with the regulatory legal matters. We are going to start with a definition of regulated sectors or regulated industry. Well, we can refer as a type of business that is controlled by the government rules. Okay, you have to be aware that those sectors used to be monopolies on the government or the state, but in the 20th century, a lot of governments started to open such kind of industries to other competitors or other rivals. And nowadays, despite the fact there are no monopolies, or it is a very rare to see a monopoly in those industries, but there is still a huge control over those activities. For example, we are speaking about telecommunications, healthcare, life science, railroad, airline and pipeline transportation, all kind of means of transport, oil and gas, electric power and transmission, and financial services and trading. Of course, this is not a closed list. The list is open and depends on the industry. We have to, as managers, ask if we are before a regulated sector or a regulated industry. And as regulated sectors or regulated industry refers to a type of business that is more or less controlled by government rules, or in this case, in the case of Spain, European Union rules. A lot of times we find that it's related with lobbying sector. Okay, to define lobby, we have to say that it's to conduct activities aimed at influencing public officials and especially members of a legislative body on legislation. Here in the European Union, we have a great industry on lobbying. According to the Corporate European Observatory, there are at least 30,000 lobbyists in Brussels, nearly matching 31,000 staff employed by the European Commission and making it second only after Washington in concentration of those seeking to affect legislation. Lobbyists signed a transparency register run by the Parliament and the Commission, although it's not mandatory. Another sector in which you have to be very careful with regulatory issues is those industries related with the gig economy. We can define the gig economy as a free market system in which temporary positions are common and companies hire independent workers for short-term commitments. The word gig is a slang word for a job that lasts a specific period of time. Well, we have to wonder several questions about the gig economy. For example, shall all regulated activities be liberalized? For example, here in Spain, we have a huge conflict between the taxi industry and the Uber industry because our taxi industry is very well regulated. Regulation is a very strict regulation, and they are fighting against Uber because they are competing with the same target group. And other questions that we have to wonder when we are speaking about a company within the gig economy is, for example, if employment contracts should ensure adequate protection for all workers, or if those independent workers shall be considered not as self-workers, not as independent, but as workers. For example, here you have a part of Spanish news stating that in Spain, the labor inspectorate of Valencia and a lot of labor inspectionists across the country has ruled that bicycle messengers from the riders working for several gig companies, for example, in this case, Deliveroo, are not self-employed, but they are employees. The qualification of independent doesn't properly define their activities. The relationship at the level of civil laws hides what is in reality relationship of employer and employee. So it's very important to ask ourselves those questions, because if we are not careful, maybe our company could go directly to bankruptcy. If, for example, the inspectorate consider that we are not hiring self-employees but rather employees. We are gonna watch a small video of the legal battle between Uber and the taxi industry here in the European Union. It's a very interesting video, and you have to wonder if shall gig economy be regulated and how.
Well, the European Union's highest court has ruled that Uber should be regulated like a taxi company. It comes in response to a complaint from the Barcelona Taxi Drivers Association, who want to stop Uber from setting up in the Spanish city. In a statement to CBS News, Uber said that the ruling will not change things in most EU countries because they already operate under transportation laws. Theo Leggett of BBC News has more.
The ride-hailing service Uber has become a fact of life in cities around Europe over the past few years. It's certainly convenient. You can call a car, monitor its progress and pay for it, all over the internet. But what exactly is it? When Uber first started operating in Europe, it tried to present itself as a kind of digital middleman, connecting passengers with drivers. In other words, it was just a mobile phone-based app and didn't need to abide by all the onerous rules and regulations that apply to regular taxi companies. But others, particularly established taxi drivers, disagreed. They said that Uber was in fact a transport services company and should be subject to the same rules and regulations as any other taxi business. Now the European Court of Justice has agreed with them. It says that legally speaking, Uber is indeed a transport company. For Uber itself, there won't be a huge immediate impact from the ruling. It's already given ground to regulators in most of its major European markets. In the UK and many other countries, it's already licensed as a taxi operator. But the decision could affect its future plans. It said today, millions of Europeans are still prevented from using apps like ours. It's appropriate to regulate services such as Uber and will continue the dialogue with cities across Europe.
So that is actually a transport service.
Meanwhile, lawyers say the impact of the ruling could go beyond taxi firms and affect other businesses which operate in the so-called gig economy.
I think other companies in the gig economy will be worried by this. This is showing that the courts aren't going to be distracted by the technology. They're going to look at what's actually happening and how local legislation should already apply to that.
Free market campaigners, meanwhile, say that's a bad thing. They think policymakers should be moving with the times.
If you halt innovation by applying old systems and old patterns of regulation simply to protect incumbents, or perhaps even, with some sort of idea about passenger safety, you are constraining the ability of people to do things in their way. And at the end of the day, people know what's good for them.
This is by no means the first legal ruling to affect Uber, and it's unlikely to be the last, as courts and regulators come to terms with the profound impact companies born in the digital age have had on traditional businesses. Theo Leggett, BBC News for CBS News, London.
Of course, the gig economy is being very controversial here in Spain and in the whole European Union. We are economies with a large tradition on public sectors, on regulated sectors, and gig economy is having a lot of huge impact on those economies. Here you can find, for example, an extract from a news stating that Palma de Mallorca, a Spanish city, was the first Spanish city to ban tourist apartments. So Airbnb couldn't operate in that city, or just could operate under a very strict measures. And after Palma de Mallorca, a lot of Spanish cities have forbidden this activity, to Airbnb activities. So, of course, in those cases of a gig economy, you have to be very careful when adopting several decisions, because regulatory issues have a lot of impact in your business. Another sector in which you have to be very careful with regulatory issues in those sectors with high potential risk. You have the case here, for example, of Monsanto. Monsanto was an American agrochemical company and was acquired by Bayer in 2018. Here you have, for example, a news related trial in which he had to pay 289 million for the first cancer trial related with some of its products. So in those kind of sectors which can have potential high risk, you have to watch very carefully regulatory issues. And we are going to finish this video by speaking about compliance in companies. Corporate compliance is a term used to describe a company program designed to prevent and detect breaches of any laws, regulations, standards, or codes with which business must comply. So when you are a manager of a company, you have to be aware of law, standards, rules, policies, regulations, transparency, requirements, and if you do not fulfill with such strict compliance, you may have very high legal risk. Even if you are a director, you can have personal liability. Well, thank you, students. This is all for today. I'm gonna finish this presentation by speaking a little bit about the last assignment. And I'm gonna finish this 6th class by thank you again for the submission of the Flipgrid video and the idea competition. I remind you that you have to send me, please, the first draft of the written case analysis. And this is the explanation of the last assignment due to the next April the 29th. Okay, it's the strategic analysis project, and as you may see, you have to write a description of a company that you decide. It could be any company worldwide, or it could be a company that you have already chosen in the written case analysis. You have to perform an analysis, a complete analysis of the company. It's very important that you use the concepts that we have used in the class, the analytical tools, and that you write down your recommendation to maximize the company's long-term performance in the future. You have a not mandatory template on several tips, several guidelines on the next page of the assignment. I have already written some of you to give you feedback about the idea competition, both the written description and the video. And for those of you who haven't received any answer yet, I'm gonna write you through this weekend. And finally, I'm gonna finish by asking you to record a brief video between 3 and 5 minutes by explaining your written description of the company, just explaining why did you choose such company and what aspects have caught your attention the most. You shall please record the video as you did in the idea competition through the app Flipgrid. And we are going to finish the video by explaining a couple of aspects of the not mandatory guidelines that you have of the strategic analysis project. For example, I would like if you can speak a little bit of the strategic purpose of the company, the main shareholders, the main stakeholders, and the Mendelow's matrix, if you perform a macro environment of the company, a micro environment analysis of the industry and the company and the competitors, if you perform a strategic group mapping of the company, if you speak a little bit about the market and the competitors of the company, about the marketing strategy, about the regulatory issues, if the companies have such kind of issues, about the competitive advantages of the company, or if they are sustainable competitive advantage or no, the value analysis, if you speak a little bit about the value chain of the company, if you speak a little bit about the working conditions, the corporate strategy, and very important, the international strategy of the company, internationalization strategy, the leadership and decision-making process within the company, the organizational structure, the board of directors, and so on, and any other aspects that you may consider important for the company, and very important, some recommendations to maximize the firm's long-term performance of the company. Thank you, students. Of course, this is a very tough assignment, so I really understand if you have any query, any doubt. I'm at your total disposal through email or through Canvas for any query that you may have. Thank you. Have a nice weekend, and I'll see you next Monday. Thank you, students.